For those who don't know me, my name is Mr. Sibeli, and I'm one of the English teachers here in the middle school. Last year, as many of you recall, we needed to modify this celebration, creating 3 separate performances. Just because it needs to be said, I'd like to take a moment and express how wonderful it is to be back here, all of us together in this space. English teachers, Miss Lucy, Miss Curry, and I will introduce our declamations and declaimers. The short introductions before each performance are designed to help you focus on what's to come, in addition to providing necessary context and/or details about the speaker's identity as it relates to the piece being declaimed. Without further delay, I'll now introduce our first declaimer. Renowned novelist Doris Lessing was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2007, a prize meant to recognize her entire body of work. In her acceptance speech, part of which Compton Jones will declaim for us in a moment, she reminds her audience just how central storytelling is to our existence, to our humanity, a fitting way to begin today's celebration.
Reading books used to be part of a general education. Older people talking to young ones must understand just how much of an education reading was, because the young ones know so much less. If children cannot read, it is because they have not read. We all know this sad story, but we do not know the end of it. Writers do not come from houses without books. I've been looking at the speeches by some of your recent prize winners. Take the magnificent Pamuk. He says his father had 500 books. His talent did not come out of the air. He was connected with the great tradition. Take V.S. Naipaul. He mentions that Indian Vedas were close behind the memory of his family. His father encouraged him to write, and when he got to England, he would visit the British Library, so he was close to the tradition. Let us take John Coetzee. He was not only close to the great tradition, he was the tradition. He taught literature in Cape Town. And how sorry I am that I was never in one of his classes, taught by that wonderfully brave, bold mind. In order to write, in order to make literature, there must be a close connection with libraries, books, the tradition. We have a treasure house of literature, going back to the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans. It is all there, this wealth of literature, to be discovered again and again by whoever is lucky enough to come upon it. A treasure. Suppose it does not exist. How impoverished, how empty we would be. We own a legacy of languages, poems, histories, and it is not one that will ever be exhausted. It is there. Always. We have a bequest of stories, tales from old storytellers, some of whose names we know, but some not. The storytellers go back and back to a clearing in the forest where a great fire burns, and the old shamans dance and sing, for our heritage of stories began in fire, magic, the spirit world. And that is where it is held today. Ask any modern storyteller, and they will tell you there is always a moment when they are touched with fire, with what we like to call inspiration. And this goes back and back to the beginning of our race, to the great winds that shaped us and our world. The storyteller is deep inside every one of us. The story maker will always be with us. Let us suppose our world is ravaged by war, by the horrors that we all of us easily imagine. Let us suppose floods wash through our cities, the seas rise. But the storyteller will be there, for it is our imaginations which shape us, keep us, create us, for good and for ill. It is our stories that will recreate us when we are torn, hurt, even destroyed. It is the storyteller, the dream maker, the myth maker. That is our phoenix, which represents us at our best and at our most creative. Thank you.
The novel To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee is set in the 1930s in Alabama during the height of the Jim Crow era. Famously, the novel centers around a court case involving a black man, Tom Robinson, who is falsely accused of a crime. In approaching his closing arguments, Atticus Finch, Tom Robinson's defense attorney, knows that the town is blinded by racism and prejudice. The jury, composed of 12 white men. And so, in an effort that he knows will ultimately fail, he tries to remind his audience of what persists as, perhaps, our country's greatest ideal, that all men are created equal before the law, one that we are still striving to fully actualize. Luke Shahid will share with us an excerpt from one of American literature's monumental works.
To begin with, this case should never have come to trial. The state has not produced one iota of medical evidence that the crime Tom Robinson is charged with ever took place. It has instead relied upon the testimony of two witnesses whose evidence has not only been called into serious question on cross-examination, but has been flatly contradicted by the defendant. The defendant is not guilty, but someone in this courtroom is. Thomas Jefferson once said that all men are created equal. There is this tendency in this year of grace, 1935, for certain people to take this phrase out of context, to satisfy all conditions. We know not all men are created equal, in the sense some people would have us believe. Some people are smarter than others. Some people have more opportunity than others. Some people are born gifted beyond the normal scope of most men. But there is one way in this country in which all men are created equal. There is one human institution that makes a pauper the equal of a Rockefeller, and the ignorant man the equal of any college president. That institution, gentlemen, is a court. It could be the Supreme Court of the United States or the humblest JP court in the land, or this honorable court in which you serve today. Our courts have their faults, as does any human institution. But in this country, our courts are the great levelers. And in our courts, all men are created equal. I'm no idealist to believe firmly in the integrity of our courts and jury system. That's no ideal to me. That's a living and working reality. I am confident that you gentlemen will review, without passion, the evidence that you've heard, come to a decision, and restore this man to his family. In the name of God, do your duty. In the name of God, believe Tom Robinson.
There are many reasons R.J. Palacio's 2012 novel Wonder has sold millions of copies in the past decade. As many of you know, the main character, Augie, has a genetic facial difference, and the novel follows his journey through the 5th grade at his fictional private school, Beecher Prep, in Manhattan. A journey that includes friendship and bullying and triumph. That school's principal, Mr. Tushman, delivers a powerful speech at the end of the novel during Augie's 5th grade graduation, and Lexi Donovan will share it with us now.
When you reflect on this past year, I want you all to look at where you are now and where you've been. You've all gotten a little taller, a little stronger, a little smarter, I hope. But the best way to measure how much you've grown isn't by inches or the number of laps you can now run around the track, or even your grade point average, though those things are all important to be sure. It's what you've done with your time, how you've chosen to spend your days, and whom you've touched this year. That, to me, is the greatest measure of success. There's a wonderful line in a book by J.M. Barrie, and no, it's not Peter Pan. It's called The Little White Bird. He writes, "Shall we make a new rule in life? Always to try to be a little kinder than is necessary." Kinder than is necessary. What a marvelous line, isn't it? Kinder than is necessary. Because it's not enough to be kind. One should be kinder than is needed. Why I love that line, that concept, is that it reminds me that we carry with us as human beings not just the capacity to be kind, but the very choice of kindness. And what does that mean? How is that measured? You can't use a yardstick. Like I was saying just before, it's not like measuring how much you've grown in a year. It's not exactly quantifiable, is it? And how do we know we've been kind? What is being kind anyway? There's another passage in a different book I'd like to share with you. In Under the Eye of the Clock by Christopher Nolan. The main character is a young man who is facing some extraordinary challenges. There's this one part where someone helps him, a kid in his class. On the surface, it's a small gesture. But to this young man, whose name is Joseph, it's, well, if you'll permit me, it was moments such as these that Joseph recognizes the face of God in human form. It glimmered in their kindness to him and hinted in their caring. It glimmered in their kindness to him. Such a simple thing, kindness. A nice word of encouragement given when needed, an act of friendship, a passing smile. Children, what I want to impart to you today is an understanding of the value of that simple thing called kindness. And that's all I want to leave you with today. I know I'm kind of infamous for my verbosity, but what I want you, my students, to take away from your middle school experience is the sure knowledge that in the future you make for yourselves, anything is possible. If every single person in this room made it a rule that wherever you are, whenever you can, you will try to act a little kinder than is necessary, the world would really be a better place. And if you do this, if you act just a little kinder than is necessary, someone else, someday, may recognize in you, in every single one of you, the face of God.
When the following speech was delivered in September of 1962, it's easy to forget that the perception was that the United States was losing the space race with the Soviet Union. President John F. Kennedy and his administration chose the moon landing as their goal, not because it was the easiest or most attainable. On the contrary, they chose it specifically because it was so far beyond each nation's capabilities that it leveled the playing field. Remarkably, less than 7 years later, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would be the first humans to step foot on the moon. Ty Carter will share an excerpt from one of the most famous speeches in American history, one that inspired the country to achieve what so many thought impossible.
We set sail on this new sea because there's new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won. And they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science and all technology, has no conscience of its own. Whether to become a force for good will depend on man. And only if the United States occupies a position of preeminence can we help decide whether this new ocean will become a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war. I do not say that we should or will go unprotected against the hostile misuse of space any more than we go unprotected against the hostile use of land or sea. But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without feeding the fires of war and without repeating the mistakes that man has made in extending his writ around this globe of ours. There's no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that goal is one that we are willing to accept and one that we are unwilling to postpone, in which we intend to win and the others too.
When Kobe Bryant retired from the NBA in 2016, he did so as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. In departing the game that had been so central to his life, he wrote a poem on the Players' Tribune titled Dear Basketball, to express all that it meant to him, which Caden Taylor will now perform for us.
Dear basketball, from the moment I started rolling my dad's tube socks and shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the Great Western Forum, I knew one thing was real. I fell in love with you. A love so deep that I gave you my all, from my mind and body to my spirit and soul. As a 6-year-old boy deeply in love with you, I never saw the end of the tunnel. I only saw myself running out of one. And so I ran. I ran up and down every court after every loose ball for you. You asked for my hustle, I gave you my heart, because it came with so much more. I played through the sweat and hurt, not because challenge called me, but because you called me. I did everything for you, and that's what you do when someone makes you feel as alive as you made me feel. You gave a 6-year-old boy his Laker dream, and I'll always love you for it. But I can't keep loving you obsessively for much longer. This season is all I have left to give. My heart can take the pounding, my mind can handle the grind, but my body knows it's time to say goodbye, and that's okay. I'm ready to let you go. I want you to now know so that we both can savor every moment we have left together. The good and the bad, we have given each other all that we had. And we both know, no matter what I do next, I'll always be the kid with the rolled up socks, garbage can in a corner, 5 seconds on the clock, ball in my hands. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Love you always, Kobe.
In February of 2014, actor Elliot Page was invited to speak at the Human Rights Campaign Time to Thrive conference of counselors who work with LGBTQ teenagers. During this event, Page came out publicly for the first time, identifying themselves as gay, and they used their platform to celebrate those who make it their life's work to make other people's lives better. Mary Kelleher will share an excerpt from that speech.
It's such an honor to be here at the inaugural Time to Thrive conference, but it's a little weird too. Here I am in this room because of an organization whose work I deeply admire, and I'm surrounded by people who make it their life's work to make other people's lives better, profoundly better. Some of you teach young people. Some of you help young people heal and to find their voice. Some of you listen. Some of you take action. Some of you are young people yourselves, in which case it's even weirder for a person like me to be speaking to you. It's weird because here I am, an actor, representing, at least in some sense, an industry that places crushing standards on all of us. Not just young people, but everyone. Standards of beauty, of a good life, of success. Standards that, I hate to admit, have affected me. You have ideas planted in your head, thoughts you never had before, that tell you how you have to act, how you have to dress, and who you have to be. I've been trying to push back, to be authentic, to follow my heart, but it can be hard. I know there are people in this room who go to school every day and get treated badly for no reason. Or you go home and you feel like you can't tell your parents the whole truth about yourself. Beyond putting yourself in one box or another, you worry about the future, about college or work, or even your physical safety. Trying to create that mental picture of your life, of what on earth is going to happen to you, can crush you a little bit every day. It is toxic and painful and deeply unfair. Sometimes it's the little insignificant stuff that can tear you down. There are pervasive stereotypes about masculinity and femininity that define how we are all supposed to act, dress, and speak. They serve no one. Anyone who defies these so-called norms becomes worthy of comment and scrutiny. The LGBT community knows this all too well. I'm inspired to be in this room because every single one of you is here for the same reason. You're here because you've adopted as a core motivation the simple fact that this world would be a whole lot better if we just made an effort to be a lot less horrible to one another. If we took just 5 minutes to recognize each other's beauty instead of attacking each other for our differences. That's not hard. It's really an easier and better way to live. And ultimately, it saves lives. Then again, it's not easy at all. It can be the hardest thing, because loving other people starts with loving ourselves and accepting ourselves. I know many of you have struggled with this. I draw upon your strength and support, and have in ways you will never know. There are too many kids out there suffering from bullying, rejection, or simply being mistreated because of who they are. Too many homeless, too many dropouts, too much bullying, too many suicides. You can change that, and you are changing it. But you never needed me to tell you that. The only thing I can really say is what I've been building up for the past 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for giving me hope. And please keep changing the world.
While campaigning for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination in 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was in Indianapolis when he received the shocking news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. The following speech shows Kennedy pleading for peace, grappling with pain and violence, and division he recognizes around him. This speech, which Dominic Borges will share, is considered perhaps Kennedy's best known and most enduring, made all the more poignant with the knowledge that Kennedy himself was assassinated less than 2 months later.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm only going to talk to you for just a minute or so this evening because I have some very sad news for all of you. And I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps what asks what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. You can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, people filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that is spread across our land with an effort to understand, compassion, and love. For those of you who are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. My favorite poet was Aeschylus. and he once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but it's love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country. So I ask you tonight to return home, to say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King, but more importantly, to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love, a prayer for understanding and that compassion of which I spoke. We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past, and we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness. And it is not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings who abide in our land. So let's dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks once wrote so many years ago: to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let's dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. Thank you very much.
Cedrice Weber is best known for being a contestant on season 18 of The Voice, where she shared her talent and passion for music. Before that, back in 2018, she delivered a speech titled "Tell Me About Your Identity Crisis" as part of a TEDx event recounting the challenges of her multi-ethnic identity the challenges of her multi-ethnic identity posed to her own journey of self-understanding. Ultimately, she found her voice and herself in music, as Ashrita Joga will share.
If you've ever been asked, "What are you?" It's a very funny question. What are you? Brian Oliva talks about the impact of when people don't know how to understand the ethnic other. For example, in college, we're asked to pick and choose a major so that they can categorize us according to our academic goal. Meanwhile, we fill out these generic surveys, asking us to pick and choose one box that best describes you. The boxes read Black, White, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander. What are you? I used to come up with a smart remark like, "Oh, I'm human." But if you're asking about my ethnic background, I'm African American, Irish, German, and Filipino. To which they would respond, "Oh, so you're like a mutt." As I grew older, I decided to revamp that question. Instead, I would ask, what are you in this world? My multi-ethnic ambiguity prompted my identity struggle, and then it led me to find my voice in music. So when I transferred to a four-year university, I wanted to explore my ethnic backgrounds through my interest in music. So I joined a gospel choir, a Pacific Islander music club, and theater. But I couldn't quite figure out where I belonged. I was confronted with more obstacles. I wasn't enough. I didn't speak Tagalog, so I wasn't Filipino enough. I wasn't dark enough to be considered Black. I certainly didn't look white. So if we're not enough of one thing, then where do we belong? I was sitting on campus one day, humming a pop tune, when a student sat next to me, and he says, "Hey, do you sing? Are you a singer?" Well, I sing, but I wouldn't consider myself a singer. I didn't speak music. I didn't read music well enough. I didn't have enough experience performing, so I wasn't enough of a singer to be in a band, so no. So then he asked me to sing something familiar, sing an Alicia Keys song. So I took a deep breath and I sang. So then he asked me to join his band. And now his band was a mixture of R&B, jazz, hip hop, and soul. If that band was told to pick and choose a box in a generic survey that best fits you, they would pick other. My multi-ethnic struggle of being the other made me realize that where I belong is to music. But there was more to explore. So I had to ask myself, what kind of singer do I choose to be? I'm finding my voice as a songwriter. Now I have the ability to sing other people's songs and lyrics in Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, and Tagalog. These songs help me connect to different parts of the world, and of course I sing the songs in my own style. But finding my voice as a songwriter is another identity struggle on its own. This struggle is going to continue to pull at me until I perform my own original music. The words that I choose define who I am as a vocalist. Music is universal. I want my lyrics to be too. I want to sing my own words. Thank you.
For centuries, a number of European countries perpetrated the Atlantic slave trade, in which slave traders abducted and transported various enslaved African people, mainly to the Americas. 24 years before slavery would be abolished in the British Empire, and 54 years before the onset of the American Civil War that would ultimately result in slavery's abolition in the United States, the British Empire abolished the slave trade in 1807. During that effort, British politician William Wilberforce was one of the most prominent voices committed to the eradication of slave trade. This excerpt that Brian Pickle will perform is from a speech Wilberforce delivered to the House of Commons on May 12, 1789.
When I consider the magnitude of the subject which I am to bring before the House, a subject in which the interests not of this country nor of Europe alone, but of the whole world and of posterity are involved. And when I think, at the same time, on the weakness of the advocate who has undertaken this great cause, when these reflections press upon my mind, it is impossible for me not to feel both terrified and concerned at my own inadequacy to such a task. But when I reflect, however, on the encouragement which I have had through the whole course of a long and laborious examination of this question, and how much candor I have experienced, and how conviction has increased within my own mind in proportion as I have advanced in my labors, when I reflect especially that however averse any gentleman may now be, we shall all be of one opinion in the end. When I turn myself to these thoughts, I take courage. I determine to forget all my other fears, and I march forward with a firmer step in the full assurance that my cause will bear me out, and that I may justify upon the clearest principles every resolution in my hand, the avowed end of which is the total abolition of the slave trade. I wish exceedingly in the outset to guard both myself and the House from entering into the subject with any sort of passion. It is not their passions I shall appeal to. I ask for only their cool and impartial reason, and I wish not to take them by surprise, but to deliberate point by point upon every part of this question. We are all guilty. We ought to plead guilty and not to exculpate ourselves by throwing the blame on others. And I, therefore, deprecate every kind of reflection against the various descriptions of the people who are more immediately involved in this wretched business. Thank you.
Think about what hands are used for and what hands allow us to do. Consider what hands symbolize. Sarah Kay's spoken word poem, Hands, poses creative insights about one of the most obvious, one of the most enduring symbols and tools of creativity and connection that we have. Kate O'Donnell will declaim this remarkable poem for us.
People used to tell me that I had beautiful hands. Told me so often, in fact, that one day I started to believe them. Until I asked my photographer father, "Hey, Daddy, could I be a hand model?" To which he said, "No way." I don't remember the reason he gave me, and I would have been upset, but there were far too many stuffed animals to hold, too many homework assignments to write, too many boys to wave at, too many years to grow. We used to have a game, my dad and I, about holding hands, because we held hands everywhere. And every time, either he or I would whisper a great big number to the other, pretending that we were keeping track of how many times we had held hands. That we were sure this one had to be 8,002,753. Hands learn more than minds do. Hands learn how to hold other hands, how to grip pencils and mold poetry, how to tickle pianos and dribble a basketball and grip the handles of a bicycle, how to hold old people and touch babies. I love hands like I love people. They are the maps and compasses in which we navigate our way through life. Some people read palms to tell your future. I read hands to tell your past. Each scar marks a story we're telling. Each calloused palm, each cracked knuckle is a missed punch or years in a factory. Now I've seen Middle Eastern hands clenched in Middle Eastern fists, pounding against each other like war drums. Each country sees their fists as warriors and others as enemies. Even if fists alone are only hands, this is not about politics. No, hands are not about politics. This is a poem about love and fingers. Fingers interlocked like a beautiful, beautiful zipper of prayer. One time, I grabbed my dad's hand so that our fingers interlocked perfectly, but he changed positions, saying, "No, that handhold is for your mom." Kids high five, but grown-ups shake hands. You need a firm handshake, but don't hold on too tight, but don't let go too soon, but don't hold on for too long. But hands are not about politics. When did it become so complicated? I always thought it was so simple. The other day, my dad looked at my hands as if seeing them for the first time, and with laughter behind his eyelids and all the seriousness a man of his humor can muster, he said, "You know, you've got nice hands. You could have been a hand model." And before the laughter can escape me, I shake my head at him and squeeze his hand. 8,002,754.
In 2008, novelist Garth Stein published The Art of Racing in the Rain, which became a bestseller for an incredible 156 weeks. Part of the novel's allure is its narrator, Enzo, who is a dog that firmly believes that he will be reincarnated as a human in his next life. Enzo is a student of human nature, a loving friend, as Rory Brosnan will make clear by performing the following excerpt from the novel.
Gestures are all that I have, and sometimes they must be grand in nature. And while I occasionally step over the line and into the world of melodramatic, it is what I must do in order to communicate clearly and effectively and make my point understood without question. I have no words I can rely on because, much to my dismay, my tongue was designed long and flat and loose, and therefore is a horribly ineffective tool for pushing food around my mouth while chewing, and an even less effective tool for making clever and complicated polysyllabic sounds that can be linked together to form sentences. And that's why I'm here now waiting for Denny. He should be here soon, lying on the cool tiles of the kitchen floor in a puddle of my own urine. I'm old. And while I'm very capable of getting older, that's not the way I want to go out. Shot full of pain medication and steroids to reduce swelling in my joints, vision fogged with cataracts, puffy plasticky packages of doggy Depend stocked in the pantry. I'm sure Denny will get me one of those little wagons I've seen in the streets. The ones that cradle the hindquarters of a dog so we can drag his ass behind him if things start to fail. That's humiliating and degrading. I'm not sure if it's as worse as dressing up a dog for Halloween, but it's close. He would do it out of love, of course. I'm sure it would keep me alive for as long as he possibly could. My body deteriorating, disintegrating around me, dissolving until there's nothing left but my brain floating around in a glass jar filled with clear liquid. My eyeballs drifting at the surface, and all sorts of cables and tubes feeding what remains. But I don't want to be kept alive, because I know what's next. I've seen it on TV, a documentary about Mongolia of all places. It was the best thing I've ever seen on television, other than the 1993 Grand Prix of Europe, of course. The greatest automobile race of all time, in which Ayrton Senna proved himself to be a genius in the rain. After the 1993 Grand Prix, the best thing I've ever seen on television is a documentary that explained everything to me, made it all clear, told the whole truth. When a dog is finished living his lifetimes as a dog, his next incarnation will be as a man. I've always felt most human. I've always known that there's something about me that's different than other dogs. Sure, I'm stuffed into a dog's body, but that's just the shell. It's what's inside that's important, the soul. And my soul is very human.
One of the most important and accomplished writers of the 20th century, African-American poet and memoirist Maya Angelou performed on some of the biggest stages. In 1993, she recited a poem at the first inauguration of Bill Clinton, making her the first poet to make an inaugural recitation in over 30 years. And in 1995, Angelou wrote and performed her poem, Brave and Startling Truth, in commemoration of the United Nations' 50th anniversary, a call for hope and justice and peace throughout the world. Josephine Crispin will declaim this startlingly beautiful poem.
We, this people on a small and lonely planet, traveling through casual space, past the loose stars across the way in different sense, to a destination where all signs tell us it is possible and imperative that we learn a brave and startling truth. And when we come to it, to the day of peacemaking, when we release our fingers from fists of hostility and allow the pure air to cool our palms, when we come to it, when the curtain falls on the minstrel show of hate and faces suited with scorn are scrubbed clean, when battlefields and coliseum no longer rake our unique and particular sons and daughters, up with the bruised and bloody grass to line identical plots in foreign soil. When the rapacious storming in the churches, the screaming racket in the temples have ceased, when the pennants are waving gaily, when the banners of the world tremble stoutly in the good clean breeze. When we come to it, when we let the rifles fall from our shoulders and children dress their dolls in flags of truce, when landmines of death have been removed and the age can walk into evenings of peace, when religious ritual is not perfumed by the incense of burning flesh, and childhood dreams are not kicked awake by nightmares of abuse. When we come to it, then we will confess that not the pyramids with their stones set in mysterious perfection, nor the gardens of Babylon, hanging as eternal beauty. In our collective memory, not the Grand Canyon, kindled into delicious color by western sunsets, nor the Danube, flowing its blue soul into Europe, not the sacred peak of Mount Fuji, stretching to the rising sun, neither Father Amazon, nor Mother Mississippi, who without favor nurture all creatures in the depths and on the shores. These are not the only wonders of the world. When we come to it, we these people on this minuscule and kithless globe, who reach daily for the bomb, the blade, and the dagger, yet who petition in the dark for tokens of peace. We his people on this mote of matter, in whose mouths abide cankerous words. When we come to it, we his people on this wayward floating body, created on this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth, a climate where every man and every woman can live freely without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible, the miraculous, the true wonder of this world. That is when, and only when, we come to it.
Dramatized in William Shakespeare's Henry V, on the eve of the Battle of Agincourt, King Henry overhears another English nobleman wish that they had more men to fight the French, who badly outnumbered the English. In response, King Henry delivers the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, a rousing call to arms that conjures the glory and immortality at stake, despite the odds. Kevin Finnerty will declaim some of the best-known lines in all of Shakespeare.
What's he that wishes so, my cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are renounced to our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I'm not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. Such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. No faith my cause, wish not a man from England. God's peace I would not lose so great an honor, as one man more methinks would share for me. The best hope I have, oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company who fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian, and he that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when the day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that outlives this day and sees old age will yearly, on the vigil, feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin's. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall a good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen now abed in England shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
Good Omens is a satiric, not to be confused with satanic, novel in which Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman illustrate the events leading up to the end of the world through the lens of a demon, Crawley, and his centuries-long angelic acquaintance, Aziraphale. Sent to torture humans since the birth of the world, Crawley navigates life among humans and records his observations about the human species, including that which Tess Harper will share with us now.
Crowley, an angel who did not so much fall as saunter vaguely downwards, had always known that he would be around when the world ended. because he was immortal and wouldn't have any alternative. But he'd hoped to be a long way off because he rather liked people. It was a major failing in a demon. Oh, he did his best to make their short lives miserable because that was his job. But nothing he could think up was half as bad as the stuff they thought up themselves. They seemed to have a talent for it. It was built into the design somehow. They were born into a world that was against them in 1,000 little ways and then devoted most of their energies into making it worse. Over the years, Crowley had found it increasingly difficult to find anything demonic to do which showed up against the natural background of generalized nastiness. There had been times over the past millennium when he felt like sending a message back below, saying, look, we may as well give up right now. We might as well shut down, send pandemonium and everywhere and move up here. There's nothing we can do to them that they don't do themselves, and they do things we've never even thought of, often involving electrodes. They've got what we lack. They've got imagination. And electricity, of course. One of them had written it, hadn't he? Hell is empty and all the devils are here. There were people who called themselves Satanists who made Crowley squirm. It wasn't just the things they did, it's the way they blamed it all on hell. They'd come up with some stomach-churning idea that no demon could have thought of in 1,000 years. Some dark and mindless unpleasantness that only a fully functioning human brain could conceive. Then shout, the devil made me do it, and get the sympathy of the court when the whole point is that the devil hardly makes anyone do anything. He doesn't have to. That's what some humans found so hard to understand. Hell isn't a major reservoir of evil any more than heaven, and Crowley's opinion was a fountain of goodness. They were just two sides in the great cosmic chess game. Where you found the real McCoy, the real grace, and the real heart-stopping evil was right inside the human mind. Old-fashioned Satanists had been brought up to it and weren't, when you got right down to it, particularly evil. Human beings mostly aren't. They just get carried away by new ideas like dressing up in jackboots and shooting people, or dressing up in white sheets and lynching people, or dressing up in tie-dye jeans and playing guitars at people. Offer people a new creed with a costume and their hearts and minds will follow. But just when you thought they were more malignant than hell could ever be, humans could occasionally show more grace than heaven ever dreamed of. Often the same individual was involved. It was this free will thing, of course. Aziraphale had tried to explain it to Crowley once. The whole point, he'd said, was that when a person was good or bad, it was because they wanted to be. People couldn't become truly holy, he said, unless they also had the opportunity to be definitively wicked. Crowley had thought about this for some time, and around the year 1023 had said, hang on, that only works, right, if you start everyone off equal. Okay, you can't start someone off in a muddy shack in the middle of a war zone and expect them to do as well as someone born in a castle. Ah, said Aziraphale, that's the good bit. The lower you start, the more opportunities you have. Crowley said, that's lunatic. No, said Aziraphale, it's ineffable. Crowley reached down and picked up the car phone. Being a demon, of course, was supposed to mean you had no free will. But you couldn't hang around humans for very long without learning a thing or two. Now, it may help to understand human affairs to be clear that most of the great triumphs and tragedies of history are caused not by people being fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, but by people being fundamentally people.
Winston Churchill was the British Prime Minister during World War II. In the early days of war, Nazi Germany overran much of Western Europe and was poised to threaten England. Many members of the British Parliament favored brokering a peace with Germany, but Churchill demanded that they make a stand, as he makes clear in the following address that is delivered to the House of Commons on June 4th, 1940. Matthias Roy will share.
I have, myself, full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected, and if the best arrangements are made, as they are, being made. We shall prove ourselves once more able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. At any rate, that is what we are going to try to do. That is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of parliaments and the nation. The British Empire and the French Republic, linked together in their cause and in their need, will defend to the death their native soil, aiding each other like good comrades to the utmost of their strength. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or large parts of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old.
For our final applause, we'd like to thank a few folks. First off, Mr. Alosa and all the CFA and audio guidance. Chris Bernstein, our photographer, and Paul Kahn, who's been diligently recording today. Our prompter, Mr. Reed, who is ready to assist should any declaimer have a challenging moment. Mrs. Cochran, who many declaimers ran to for presentation pointers throughout the process. Parents, both here and at home, who listened to and encouraged their children as they learned their pieces. Miss Curry, Miss Gordon, Mr. Toussaint, Miss Cohen, and Miss Corey, who listened to and evaluated the 18th, 5th, and 6th grade finalists, and Mr. Reed, Miss Lucy, Mrs. Hammond, and Miss Francois, who listened to and evaluated the 35 7th and 8th grade finalists. Together, we built this program, and it bears repeating that there were many, many more declamations worthy of recognition on this stage. And I'd like to thank Miss Lucy and Miss Curry for their introductions, and particularly Miss Curry, who was asked at the last minute to do so today, because Miss Corey was originally slated to serve in that role, and we certainly miss her here today, not least because this will be her last year with the Declamation, so we really miss her presence here today, but again, a huge thank you to Miss Curry for stepping in. Which leads me to those I'd like to recognize last, but certainly not least, and that'd be you, the students. The best part about this collective effort, what's always most impressive, is the way you support your classmates and help push each other. Each one of you should be proud of what you accomplished this winter. It was truly remarkable. We will see many of you again, this time next winter, at the 37th Declamation celebrations. And until then, and please hold your applause until the end, allow your imagination and stories to recreate you. Strive to make our ideals living, working realities. Above all else, act a little kinder than is necessary. Set sail on new seas, undaunted. Savor every moment you have with that which you love. Love and accept yourself so as to love and accept others. Dedicate yourself to justice. Find your voice and sing your song. take shame, but march forward with a firmer step. Let your hands grip and touch, mold and hold. Recognize the soul in all that surrounds you. Remember that we are possible and miraculous, true wonders. Covet honor and fraternity in all of your endeavors. And never forget that you're fundamentally surrounded by people. And finally, against all that is odious and tyrannical, fight.